minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name's Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. If you're wondering what Anarchist's all about, it's about creating a society without rulers. Anarchos, without rulers, not without rules. So how do people govern themselves without rulers? By creating social, institutional and political structures which are based on equal decision-making power, people making the decisions and electing or appointing recallable delegates to coordinate those decisions at a local, regional and national, even possibly international level. It's a society where wealth is held in common. It's inequalities in power and wealth which give people or individuals or groups or minorities the ability to exercise authority over the others. So the anarchist struggle is a struggle to create a society without rulers. Now, obviously, we've got a program for you. Whether it's interesting or not, I don't know. It's really up to you to decide that. It's not my role to decide whether I am interesting or not. Whether it assists you in understanding the world, hopefully it does. And if it does, hopefully it encourages you to get involved in activities that may change the current situation and help us create that society without rulers, an anarchist society. Now, I've got a potpourri of issues to look at, some more interesting than others. And who knows? They may be of some interest. They are of some interest to me, and usually issues I pick are basically related to that struggle for change. Now, I'd like to start off by thanking all those people who went to Ballarat for the special medal presentation to Yosef Al-Rimawi on Sunday. Thank you very much. I think it went off exceptionally well. And just like to remind people about the celebrations on the 3rd of December. Now, the Museum of Australian Democracy at Eureka will be closed down. The council is taking over, the Ballarat City Council will be taking over that museum, and it'll be interesting to see whether we get local participation in it and how it's going to be restructured. So we're all waiting, but the keys will be handed over to the Ballarat City Council in mid-April. Now, algorithms. Interesting word, isn't it? Algorithms. Now, I'm sure many of our listeners, not all of them, but many of our listeners are familiar with YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And we think of them as wonderful resources, full of fascinating information. And a lot of people have got the impression that it's some type of value-free type of exchange of information. Well, algorithms are basically computer programs, which are automatic, which are designed to increase people's use of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Because the way these corporations, these new corporations, make their money is not by not paying tax, although that helps, but by selling advertising space. It's very simple. You sell advertising space. They are selling advertising space. You are the content. Ideas are the content. News, whether it's real or unreal, is the content. You know, that's the content. The more salacious, the more controversial, the more hits, the greater the price to advertise on these platforms. Simple thing. But the problem with algorithms is, although they're created by human beings initially, they're created in such a way as to ensure that it's you actually accessing a site that's important, not whether the information in that site has any bearing to reality, whether it's real or not, whether the information stands up to scrutiny. So what we are seeing is a cynical exploitation of reality in order not just to suit people with particular viewpoints about the world, but to increase advertising revenue for transnational corporations who in many situations do a great deal of harm by breaking down social cohesion in a society by pitting people against each other, all in the name of advertising revenue. So next time you look at your Facebook page, put in a little comment on your Twitter account, or get a belly laugh out of another cat movie on YouTube, think of the reason and think this platform's been created. It's not about free exchange of ideas. It's not about analysis. Content, whether it's real or not, manufactured, propaganda, content is there basically to increase advertising revenue for these corporations. So in many ways it's no different to a traditional newspaper or a privately owned radio station or a privately owned television station. No difference. The only difference is that material, which can be exceptionally offensive to different groups, which creates hate and fans the fires of hatred by pointing the finger at the other, are freely available on these platforms, while platforms like commercial television and radio, which work within a legislative framework, have to, look at the content. So think about it. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. Now let's keeping on with the media. Now, you may have seen some ABC executives squirming at the Senate's hearings. And a lot of interesting things have been happening at the ABC over the last decade or so, and we are now harvesting the fruits of these changes. Now, a lot of people think I'm very unfair when I talk about the government guild at ABC. And I'd just like to make a few comments about the chief economics reporter, Emma Alberici, who had an article pulled down from the ABC and was hung up to dry by the executive, not because the article was factually incorrect, but the slant Emma Alberici, the chief economics reporter, not just some, cadet, but the chief economics reporter of the ABC, did about corporate tax minimisation. Within a few hours of that report going up, it was taken down after the Prime Minister's office the Business Council of Australia and Qantas complain vigorously to the ABC. And the ABC claims it was taken down because it went against its editorial guidelines. And when you think that editorial guidelines are based on the idea of massaging facts and figures in order to suit a current ideological whim, you begin to understand how gelded the ABC is. And this has occurred over a 20-year period. Because over the last 2 decades, the ABC has been in the sight of conservative governments and conservative organisations like the Institute of Private Affairs. I don't call them public affairs, the Institute of Private Affairs, who have hunted the ABC and changed the structure of the ABC and the way editorial policy is created and implemented in order to prevent and stop the ABC from presenting a whole range of views. And if you think, and it's been done by a variety of ways, and when people, rail about certain presenters, look, I don't give a shit about the presenters. I really don't. I mean, they work under editorial guidelines. They don't follow those editorial guidelines, or they try to stretch the envelope as Emma Alberici did. Well, their stuff doesn't get published. Because what's happened is a number of things has happened. One, the board of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation has been stacked by reactionary and conservative figures. 2, more importantly than stacking the figureheads, the board, more importantly, senior executives have now been placed in every major position on the ABC who are basically bureaucrats who have no understanding that the ABC Charter is about providing a wide range of viewpoints which are actually not seen or heard in the commercial networks, who are basically bean counters, who in many situations, not all, but many situations, have been appointed not because of their intellectual abilities or their abilities in terms of previous managerial roles, but because of their ideological positions, who now not only determine editorial policy but implement editorial policy. Then we've seen, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, the transformation of the ABC as an organisation which presents different viewpoints and criticisms of government and opposition policies into a cheer squad for the government of the day. And we've seen this, especially in the last 6 months, with the dilution of the political content on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, where programs that have been on for decades have basically been gelded and replaced with crap that you can find on any commercial network at any time of the day or night. Really lightweight garbage. And to think I pay 4 cents a day for that garbage, makes me sick. And then on top of that, all the presenters are on short-term contracts, which are renewed every 3 or 4 years, in some cases every year. So that means if somebody kind of tries to stretch the envelope and implement what they think are the editorial guidelines, and like Emma Alberici did, providing an analysis which didn't actually please the government of the day or the Business Council of Australia or Qantas, that they get their articles pulled and are hung out to dry. And don't be surprised that in the next 6 months you'll see that she'll be shunted aside and removed when her short-term contract comes up for renewal. So there's no point, screaming and carrying on about a particular presenter. Now, these people, when I broadcast, I come here with a whole range of views. Nobody tells me on the Community Radio Network, nobody tells me on Community Radio 3CR, from where this program is broadcast from, what to talk about and the slant to put on that particular subject. I mean, I'm independent. Totally independent. That's why there's such a range of viewpoints on the Anarchist World this week. I mean, when I was doing a little bit of a program, as a guest on the ABC in the late 1990s or mid-1990s, I mean, within a few weeks I had some conservative, reactionary, person I had to debate against, which was well and good. But then because I upset Mr. John Howard, the program was removed. Not only did, I lose the position, but the presenter who'd been there for a decade lost that position, has never actually been put back on air. And fortunately for that particular presenter, they're actually long-term staff. And there's no long-term staff appointed to the ABC anymore, all short-term contracts. So you can see how the independence of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation has been destroyed. And why do I think that's important? I'll tell you why I think it's important. Because when you look at the commercial networks and you look at most of the garbage on the World Wide Web, you begin to understand how important it is to have a viewpoint that doesn't fit current economic or ideological orthodoxy in society. So we should be very concerned. The last vestiges of independence at the ABC are being shredded by bureaucrats who are basically there to ensure alternative opinions are not heard, and are there basically to create some type of commercial clone within the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Just extraordinary. Extraordinary stuff. But the problem is, very few people would be interested in fighting for the ABC in this day and age because it's so riddled with these changes. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. My name's Joseph Scar, I'm hosting today's program. Now, all those stock market investors, you're all, as I said, I got a deep throat these days, and I have a little chat occasionally with my source, and he or she, we won't identify them, gives me a little bit of wisdom. And the word for today is volume. Low volume, high volume. You like those words? Low volume, high volume. Now, you all may have remembered about 10 days ago, the market kind of took a bit of a dive downwards. And we're all told that it's about economic fundamentals. Obviously, the market has nothing to do with economic fundamentals. It's about where people think they can make a buck. And over the last week, it's been slowly, rising. In Australia, the market it may have come down now, but it had broken the 6,000 barrier, which somehow is seen as, the road to economic nirvana. Now, I've been told what you need to watch is the volume, the number of shares that are traded on a particular day on the stock exchange. And the current rally is what's described as a low volume rally. You like that word? Low volume market rally. What that means is idiots like you and me, mum and dad investors, are the ones who are trading. So there's not much trading going on in the stock market, while the big institutional investors, the corporations, are either selling to the idiots, you and me, or waiting to see what happens. So if you think we're in some type of recovery mode as far as the Australian stock market and the world stock market is concerned, think again. The only time you should really take any notice of the stock market is when if it's going up or down, is in terms of the amount of stock which is traded on that particular day. Just an observation. People say, why do you bother? I'll tell you why I bother. Because it's important to understand how the system works. If you don't understand how the system works, you don't understand that basically the publicly listed companies are basically it's just another name for a casino, where there's all these things, derivatives, it goes on, where people have puts. These are all little fancy words they use to make a buck at your expense. And those of you who think the next federal election is all going to be all about tax cut, especially corporate tax cuts, and somehow those corporate tax cuts will flow down to you, think again. Because there are 3 players in Australian society. Well, there are actually 4 players in Australian society. Social Security beneficiaries, which make up about 33% of the population, about 1 in 3, who are 100% reliant on taxation revenue which comes in. That's one player. Big player. A player that's been constantly squeezed. And those of you who are interested, who are living in Melbourne, who are interested in finding out how Social Security people are constantly squeezed, especially people on unemployment benefits and New Start allowances, there is a conference at Melbourne Trades Hall Friday, the 2nd of March, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m, and yours truly will be running a session on privatisation of the Social Security network and Centrelink. So what I'm saying is, you get squeezed. Then you've got wage earners. Still a significant proportion of the population, about 70, about another 50, 60% of the population. Wage earners, the people who basically pay tax in this country. Wage earners. And if you're a wage earner, you're competing in a marketplace with shareholders. You compete in the marketplace with shareholders, corporations. And the most fascinating statistic of the last 40 years is the reversal of what's occurred in the marketplace in terms, you like that word, marketplace, we're all in a marketplace, a reversal in the marketplace of what's occurred in terms of profit. 40 years ago, 2/3 of every dollar, that's 66.6 cents, well, 66.666666 cents of every dollar went into the pockets of wage earners. Simple, isn't it? Today, 40 years later, only 33.333% of every dollar goes into the pockets of wage earners. So most of the profits which are being made by wage earners, most of the profits that have been made by wage earners have basically been gobbled up by shareholders. And most shareholders, as you know, are large corporations. End of story. Even if it's your superannuation fund, it's still a large corporation. So think about it. You listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. Now, I'd just like to talk about 2 events which are coming up this weekend, and I'm sorry to say they're in Melbourne. First of all, the Public Interest Before Corporate Interests Congress will be held from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Melbourne Unitarian Peace Memorial Church on Saturday the 3rd of March. That's Saturday the 3rd of March. That's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Now, speaking rights are limited to PIPSI members, but observers are welcome. It is a PIPSI Congress for the members of public interest before corporate interests. Now, if you'd like to join on the day, you can join on the day and that'll give you speaking rights. So if you just like to observe, see what's happening with public interest before corporate interests, well, come along. Saturday the 3rd of March, Melbourne-based Unitarian Peace Memorial Church at 110 Grey Street, East Melbourne. Observers are welcome, but observers don't have speaking rights. Now on Sunday, the 4th of March, we'll be holding the inaugural event for the Ellen Jose Memorial Foundation. So join us at Herring Island. No, it's not miles from the city. It's actually in Richmond. It's the island in the middle of the Yarra. Melway reference 2MC2. 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for a picnic barbecue. You'll need to catch a punt to get across to the island. It's $2 per person, $5 per family. Pensioners, unemployed and children under 12 don't have to pay to get on the punt. So the punt leaves the Como landing at Melway's map, as I said, 58G2 or 2MC2. So you don't need to ring anybody, just turn up on the day. 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We encourage you to bring food to add to the communal table, and you do get a present when you leave, your own rubbish, as there are no rubbish bins on the island, and we're expected, obviously, to take home our own rubbish. And there is an arts exhibition going at the same time. Why Herring Island? Because in 1997, Ellen Jose created a sculpture there, 10 Durham, and I'll give a little, which means meeting place, and I'll give a little bit of a talk about 10 Durham and what's it all about. So bring your own food and drinks to the picnic to put on the communal table. So that's you can go to the Facebook page to get more information. That's Ellen Jose, ELLENJOSE Memorial Foundation. So that's Sunday, the 4th of March, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And don't get, what a busy week I'm going to have. What a busy weekend. Friday, I'll be doing a workshop at the Unemployed Workers Union seminar meeting, which will be held at Melbourne Trades Hall from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then on Saturday, we've got the Public Interest Before Corporate Interests Congress, to which observers are welcome to, and that's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Unitarian Church, 110 Grey Street in East Melbourne. And on Sunday, the 4th of March, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m, we have the picnic at Herring Island for the Ellen Jose Memorial Foundation, next to her sculpture 10 Durham, which was created in 1997, which is Aboriginal word for, the Wurundjeri word for meeting place. So you've got a full weekend ahead of you if you're interested. It's the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name's Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. Okay, so what else have we got? What else do we have? Even the blind are beginning to see. Now, I'm going to mention 3 names, and I don't want you to vomit. Please don't vomit. If you do, you're going to have to clean up after yourself. I'm going to mention 3 names. President Trump, President Putin, and President or Supreme Leader Xi Jinping. They're the men of the world. They are the men which head the 3 major military, industrial, economic conglomerations on the planet Earth in 2018. President Trump, aka the Groper, President Putin, aka He-Man, President Xi Jinping, aka Mao Zedong. Now, what do they all have in common? They all want to be leaders for eternity. Now, the whole point of limiting the head of a nation state's term to 8 years or 6 years or 2 terms is based in the idea that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, we've already heard that Mr. Trump is very interested, or aka the Groper, President Groper, is very interested in running for the next presidential election, and he will. And he's even more interested in changing the current legislative arrangements in the United States of America to give him the ability to contest more than 2 elections. Now, our good old Vladimir Putin, He-Man, has gone one step further. He has, for a little bit of trickery, changed the Russian constitution so he can stand as president for the next 20 years. Now, Mr. Groper, President Groper and Mr. Putin have one problem. They have to go through the motions of going to the electorate in order to cement their power. In China, the Chinese Communist Party, quite rightly, in the 1980s decided they didn't want another Mao Zedong as paramount leader and capped the number of times that a leader could be president was for 2 terms. Over the last 48 hours, President Xi Jinping has been able to manipulate the current constitutional arrangements for his domination of the Chinese Communist Party to ensure that he stays as president till at least 2035. And the good thing about being president of China, Xi Jinping, all you've got to do is be able to manipulate the Politburo in the Communist Party. You don't have the added inconvenience of going through an electoral process. So it looks like we're back to the 1930s, the period where the strong leader, the man who has his hands on all the levers of power, a number of individuals, a handful of individuals, have total control, not only over the state apparatus, but total control over the lives of billions of people. That we have to rely on the machinations and paranoia of a handful of individuals who have ultimate power. That's why I became an anarchist 50 years ago. Because it's quite simple to see, the greater the concentration of power in the hands of an individual, as we saw with Pol Pot and Stalin and, Hitler, irrespective, of their political, ideological connections, but the greater the concentration of power in the hands of an individual, the greater the damage that is caused to the maximum number of people. So in 2018, instead of talking about the devolution of power, breaking down hierarchy, breaking down the ability of individuals to be in positions of extreme power, controlling a national apparatus and weapons of mass destruction which could transform the very planet we're on, we're now moving towards creating dictatorships. Whether these dictators are elected or are self-appointed or appointed by some organisation like the Chinese Communist Party, we are now going back to the 1930s, and we saw what happened with the rise of fascism and the consequences it had on the lives of millions, if not tens of millions of people. So in 2018, for us as a society to see the three most powerful people on the planet, increasing their grip on power within these societies is really puts us in a very difficult position. Because already we are seeing the shift in ideological and political concerns around the globe. And the shift has moved from Islamic fundamentalism, which is in its dying gasps, to the colonial ambitions and the nationalist posturings of making the United States great again, of making Russia great again, and ensuring that China under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party joins the United States and Russia in that battle. And if you listen to Xi Jinping, the current president, you can actually hear exactly what is in store. And this makes it a little bit difficult for Australia. Because although we like to think of ourselves in the United States of America camp, where we jump Pavlov-like every time the United States of America asks us to get involved in some foreign war somewhere else in order to protect their interests, our major economic trading partner is China. And as friction between China and the United States of America grows, especially in this part of the world, which China considers part of its domain, and which the United States of America considers its domain, we will find ourselves squashed in a pincer movement. If we cut our economic ties with China in order to please our American masters, there will be total economic dislocation in this country. Another depression. If we, hoist our banner with the United States of America, irrespective of who the president is at that particular point in time, we put ourselves in a position where we could be involved in another military war. I know it sounds a little bit alarmist, but that's the reality. So keep your eye on the ascendancy of the strong ruler, the individual who exercises absolute control over the state apparatus. Think about it. You listen to the Anarchist World this week and think about why you listen to the Anarchist World this week, because we're about devolving power. We're about breaking down hierarchy. We're about ensuring wealth is held in common and used for the common good, not the good of a minority or individuals. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. If you'd like to send me a message, 0439 395 489, 0439 395 489. You can write to me, that's right, at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. You can go to the Public Interest Before Corporate Interest website, pibci.net. Download the application form, pibci.net. Download the application form. You go to my Facebook page, Toscano for the Public. Toscano for the Public. You can go to the Defend and Extend Public Housing Facebook page. You can go to the Peter Norman Commemoration Committee Facebook page. So there's Facebook pages galore. So if you think if you decide that you don't want to bother about computers, you can always send us a note and I'll send you out some material in the mail. So Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Now we've got something to celebrate. You ready? You ready? We have a great celebration of the corporate tax cut. Now, you know that in the last financial year, you'll love this, that the cost of living, let's call it that, the cost of living has outpaced wage growth. Fancy words, are they? The cost of living has outpaced wage growth. That means that every worker in Australia, or the great majority of workers in Australia, will and has received and will continue to receive a wage cut. And why has the cost of living outpaced wage growth? Because the trade union movement has been legislated out of existence in this country. Because it is a criminal offence to withdraw your labour in this country in 2018. Because every time there's a corporate tax cut or a little bit of corporate welfare, the extra money that has come, the extra income that comes in, is used to either buy back shares, pay dividends to shareholders, or big fat salaries to executives. And none of this money trickles down, because it tends to get stuck, because it's actually gets stuck to wage earners. So what we see in the real world, not the fake world, but the real world, is the cost of living. That's the cost of the bills you have to pay in order to survive, mortgage or rent, food, education expense, and the list goes on, has outpaced wage growth. So you're in negative territory. And when you add the casualisation of the work to the equation, in 2018, 1 in 4 workers on wages, that's 25%, 1 in 4 workers are casual. That means they have no protections that a full-time worker enjoys as far as the law is concerned. Fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating. And we're told the big ticket issue for the next federal election is going to be corporate tax cuts, because if we're nice to the corporate world, they will pass on any profits to their employees. And I believe in the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, and the Easter Bunny as well. That's right. If you believe that garbage, you believe in, as I said, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and life after death. Now, I have kept away from the Barnaby crap because I'm not particularly interested. Now, I've got to apologise. I was beginning to get a little bit of respect for old Barnaby, not for his behaviour or his policies or ideological bent or his hypocrisy, but the fact the boy was going to dig himself in and no one was going to dig him out. And I thought, well, the boy's got a bit of guts. He's going to dig in there, and they're going to have to blow him out. But guess what? The boy has resigned. He resigned. You know what they say? You know what they say? When things get tough, the weak get going. Barnaby, not only are you a total hypocrite, and you made a mess of a lot of people's lives, you've now shown yourself to be a weak, gutted bastard. Here we are, thinking that you were going to get blown out of your position as Deputy Leader of the Opposition. You said you'd been in a lot of scraps and you'd won them all. I was waiting for a bit of a fight. And what do? When the pressure increases, you put up the white flag and walk into the backbench. Come on, mate. Come on. Where's this strong leadership garbage that you keep talking about? You're listening to the Anarchist World this week and talking about trolls. I think I mentioned trolls last week. Gutless, anonymous worms. Isn't it nice to see that the head of the Ethical Standards Division, an Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Guerin, from Victoria Police, resigned? You know why he resigned? Oh, forget about all that garbage he put on the net, you know. Who does he think he did? Who does he think he was that he could actually get away with all that garbage? And forget about the fact that he was embroiled in, you know, some really nasty racist shit 10 years ago when he went to, you know, give a bit of a pep talk to the Flemington police who have a little bit of trouble at that particular point in time regarding their image. But, you know, Mr. Guerin doesn't seem to understand the net. So what are the lessons of Mr. Guerin? Well, the lessons of Mr. Guerin is, one, the Victoria Police never learns. I mean, the man had form, and to think he could rise up over the next decade and become heads of the professional ethical standards division and become an assistant commissioner really highlights the old boys network in Victoria Police. But more importantly, and this is what's important, it highlights that Victoria's kind of addiction to police investigating police needs to stop. That we need an external authority to actually investigate police complaints. Because when you have a troll like Mr. Guerin in charge of such an important part of the police force, you begin to understand the dangers of police investigating police. And in many countries, Western countries around the world, in democratic societies, parliamentary democracies around the world, we don't have police investigating police. Because anybody who's been involved in any complaints regarding police behaviour knows how it's almost impossible to get any justice. Ask any of those people that are involved in 20-year litigations regarding Victoria Police's behaviour. So I think the outing of Mr. Guerin highlights not only a cultural issue within sections of Victoria Police, but it highlights the urgent need for an external authority to be created by the Victorian state government, irrespective of any Victorian opposition bleating, and there's always Victorian opposition bleating under law and order, Mr. Andrews, to have an external authority which has the power of a Royal Commission to investigate complaints. If we can set up a building authority which has the power to force ordinary workers on a building site to answer questions or fine them $10,000 a day or imprison them, where ordinary building workers have less legal protection than somebody who imports $1 billion worth of ice into this country, isn't it about time we had some type of external authority set up which is there to investigate police in the state of Victoria? And last but not least, Michael McCormack, the new leader of the National Party. I can see the climate change flat earthers celebrating, walking off the edge of the planet. Because you know what Mr. McCormack's claim to fame is? No, he's not a steady hand on the National Party leadership. His claim to fame is that he thinks that climate change is a left-wing plot. Maybe we should crowd fund a little trip for Michael McCormack to the Arctic Circle to see what's happening to the Arctic ice float, which will most likely disappear in the next 20 years. But again, there ain't any climate changes there. So, what an extraordinary week. A climate change flat earther as the leader of the National Party. The gutless boy wonder Barnaby moves to the backbench. Gearan, the Vic Pole troll, exposed. The great leaders, the Groper, Putin and Xi Jinping, have wet dreams about becoming Stalin and Mao. The stock market kind of trundling along. And behind it all those algorithms which are out there to create more advertising revenue for the new social media, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. What a wonderful world we live in. So if you want to get away from all that, 3 things that have been organised for this weekend. Friday the 2nd of March, 4pm to 7pm, Melbourne Trades Hall, corner of Victoria and Lygon Street, Unemployed Workers Union, seminars, talks. I'll be giving a particular talk on privatisation of the social security system. Come along. That's Friday the 2nd of March. Saturday the 3rd of March, 10am to 4pm. The Public Interest Before Corporate Interests Congress, 10am to 4pm. Melbourne Unitarian Peace Memorial Church. Join us, observers welcome. Sunday the 4th of March, the Ellen Jose Memorial Foundation picnic at her sculpture, Tendarum on Herring Island, 11am to 2pm. And next Wednesday, the 7th of March, the second Defend and Extend Public Housing Rally on the steps of the Victorian Parliament House at midday. Thank you once again for listening to The Anarchist World this week. My name's Joseph Scarn. I've been hosting today's program. Messages on 0439 395 489. Join Public Interest Before Corporate Interests. Download pipsy.net, the application form. Go to the Anarchist Institute website, anarchistmedia.org, anarchistmedia.org. Go to my personal Facebook page, Toscano for the Public. Peter Norman Commemoration Committee Facebook page, Peter Norman Commemoration Committee. Ellen Jose Memorial Foundation Facebook page, yes, we're increasing the advertising for them. And what else? Oh, yes, and Defend and Extend Public Housing Facebook page. And obviously, lots of things happening. Get involved. Break your TV set. Flush the computer down the drain. Join us on the 2nd of March, the 3rd of March, the 4th of March, the 7th of March. Lots of things happening. Thanks you once again for listening to The Anarchist World this week on your local community radio station, courtesy of the Community Radio Network. This program has been streaming live on 3cr.org.au as well as the Community Radio Network. The program is also podcast. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. That's 3cr.org.au. Thank you once again for listening to the Anarchist World This Week on your local community radio station. Listen in next week to the Anarchist World This Week.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.